All right, chapter 13. I'll just recap chapter 12 real quick. So Goethe saw her father across the wall again and confirms that he wants her to dig somewhere. Goethe receives a letter from Anna that most likely came from her father or Dominic, and it's a drawing of the back of a building. She thinks this is where she needs to dig, and she begins looking around the city for that building, but she can't find it yet. And she received this letter as part of a package that was sent to Anna's family from someone they know in the West, and the paper had her name on it. Also, Anna still won't be friends with Goethe. Oh, so a little bonus. I wanted to show you guys some pictures. When I read historical fiction, I really like to have like a visual of the time period. Okay, so I have some pictures that I chose from Google Images to share with you. So I'm going to do that before I read chapter 13. Okay, so here is a picture. Here, I wanted to start with this one. Yeah, so remember at the start of the book when people realized that this wall was being built, some people knew, some people didn't, and when it was still just a fence, people were escaping to the other side. So this is when there was no Grenzers there, no death strip. They started escaping through like that. So when Dominic and Aldous went over, it would have been something easy like this. Here's a picture of some Grenzers when it was just a barbed wire fence. And this is the death strip here before it was really the death strip. And this is a picture of the construction that occurred overnight in one section of the wall. And here's a picture. I really needed to see what these platforms looked like. So you know how Goethe keeps seeing her father and brother standing on these platforms? This is what that was like. So this is a picture of the West, and like tourists and West Berliners could go up on these platforms and look over and see what was going on in the East. And then I found this neat diagram of the Berlin Wall. So this is the West over here, and this is the East. Okay, so it says the border zone was built entirely on the East German territory. And then the wall was buffered by a restriction zone, hundreds of yards wide, and even the buildings in that area were off limits. So this is what was called the death strip. So the area between the inner and outer wall. And they used sand so that it would show footprints of people who were trying to escape. And it's true that guards would try to shoot anyone who was trying to cross through here. So take a close look at that. Pause if you want to take a look at this diagram. It's pretty interesting, and it includes a map of Berlin, East Germany, West Germany, so you can see kind of what that was looking like at the time. Okay, so let's proceed with the story. All right, 3 days of searching turned up nothing. So many places came close, but something was always different from the picture. It had the wrong type of roof, or different windows, or no chimney at all. It seemed like everything built since the war looked alike, and the building in the drawing appeared older than that. About half a mile east of my school was a street of older homes, but I didn't see the one from the drawing among them. I was beginning to wonder if this building really existed, at least in East Berlin. The 4th day was another Saturday, a week since I had last seen Papa. Mama sent me to school with a loaf of bread to give Anna's family. It wasn't much, but it was all we had to spare, and Mama wouldn't have dared offer more anyway. Anna's family was still being shamed for what Peter had done. Mama didn't want it to look like our families were that close. So what they mean by them being shamed, it means that they're being made to feel bad or embarrassed for their behavior, for Peter trying to escape. But Anna wasn't in school that day, and the teacher said she had complained the day before of not feeling well. So I decided to deliver the bread on my way home that afternoon. At least it gave me the opportunity to walk a different neighborhood of Berlin. And a part of me hoped that as her sorrows healed, so would our friendship. As a reader, this kind of stuff really catches my eye. I noticed that she just called it Berlin, not East Berlin. Anna met me at the door, and although she looked as healthy as anyone else, I didn't question her. If I could get away with faking sickness to skip school, I'd do it every day and not feel a hint of guilt. Before Anna slammed the door, I shoved a loaf of bread at her. "This is from my mother," I said lamely. "She thought your family might want it." She didn't seem too enthusiastic about accepting it. And though I wanted to believe the Stasi couldn't find anything wrong with my mother's simple gift, I wasn't that naive, not anymore. So that means a naive person, like they show like a lack of experience or a lack of wisdom, or they're really innocent and they don't know things. But whether she wanted it or not, the bread was in Anna's hands now, and the only way she could refuse it would be to drop it on the floor or hurl it back at me. If she did, I wouldn't have much cared. All Mama had asked was that I give her the bread, not force her to keep it. Finally, Anna mumbled, "Thank you." She started to close the door, but I put a foot on the jamb to block it. "I'm sorry Peter's gone, but you shouldn't be ashamed of what he tried to do." Though I hadn't planned to say that, the words poured out of me. The thoughts had swirled in my head for so long. It was a relief to speak them, and at least I was careful to keep my voice low. He wanted a better life, a free life. You can't blame him for that, or at least I don't. "We have a good life here," Anna said. "Why wasn't it enough for him?" I explained it to her the way Fritz explained it to me long ago. "You've seen the sun, Anna. Now that you have, could you ever be content with just the stars for light? Would that be enough for you?" So what does Goethe mean here? She's using a metaphor, using the sun as stars and stars for a different meaning. What does she mean, do you think? What is she trying to tell Anna? Anna bit her lip, and her eyes darted both ways along the hallway. If anyone had been there, she'd already have shut her door on me. When she was sure that we were alone, she whispered, "The night he tried escaping, Peter left a letter for us on his bed. The Stasi have it now, but his roommate at the university found it and told us what it said. The final line was, 'If I don't stand for freedom, then I must sit in chains.' Is that what you believe too, Goethe?" So what did Peter mean by this in the letter? What was he trying to tell his family by having that as the last line of his letter before he escaped or tried to escape? And now Anna's asking if Goethe thinks that. And she seems kind of in disbelief, like, how could you think something like that? Of course I did. We were in chains, even if she couldn't see them. I spent 6 days a week in a school that taught me freedom was a lie, and every minute in public pretending I believed it. She knew the consequences for speaking out just as I did. Why else was Herr Kraus arrested? And there was the wall. If life was so terrible beyond it, then why force us to stay here? But I couldn't say any of this to her, not anymore. Anna seemed to already have the answer for her question. Her gaze hardened. I told my parents the real people in chains are those who break our laws. They must know. They're going to be caught sooner or later. Suddenly, our simple conversation began to sound like an accusation. I wasn't sure why. As far as I knew, I wasn't breaking any laws. None of the big ones, anyway. A door opened down the hallway, and I turned to see who was coming. In that instant, Anna slammed her door shut, and I became a disease again. I marched from her apartment with a few unkind phrases in mind that I wished I had said while I had the chance. She was practically quoting the state's propaganda, no better than a puppet on their string. Besides, I had only brought bread, not smuggled goods or revolutionary pamphlets. All right, let's break this part down a little bit. So first, propaganda, state's propaganda. State is another word for country, not just like a state in a country. And state's propaganda would be like messages from the country that try to get the citizens of that country to believe one thing or another. Okay, so propaganda messages. And a type of propaganda was a revolutionary pamphlet. So that would be propaganda from the other side, not the government side. So like pieces of paper and booklets that would be handed out to try to get people to think a certain thing. So maybe Herr Krauss was making revolutionary pamphlets with his stamps. So Goethe's saying here that Anna's basically quoting the state's propaganda. So what does she mean? She's basically saying that Anna's saying things that are coming straight from what the East German government, the GDR, wants her to think. That's what Goethe's saying, okay? And now that you know what propaganda is, why do you think that would be an important tool for the Stasi to use? Why would they be using that? And is it working? No secret messages were baked inside, and we asked for nothing in return. It was only bread, and yet she had treated me like I brought the plague. No, she believed something worse, that wherever I went, the Stasi would eventually follow. That was a ridiculous idea. Wasn't it? I decided to take a shortcut home, which sent me down a narrow alley that I usually avoided because of the leftover rubble from the bombings at the end of the last war. But this time, all I wanted was to get home and slam my bedroom door behind me and try to forget I had ever been friends with Anna. Except where I should have turned back onto the main road. I looked farther down the alley and saw it led to the back of some other buildings. I'd never been on this abandoned street before, yet it still felt familiar. Walking faster to keep pace with my racing heartbeat, I took in the details of one particular building. It was old and square and made of brick and looked like it would crumble if hit by a strong enough wind. 2 long windows ran up the back, and a chimney going up the side was made of a darker colored brick. The 3 square windows at ground level were boarded up, and once I left the alley, it was easy to see why. The building now served as part of the Berlin Wall. Tall cinder block rows butted up directly against the old building, and the barbed wire emerged from the wall all the way up and over the top of the building. I could only assume the front of the building was inside the death strip, and that it was sealed up too. 2 more old buildings connected in a row to the building in front of me. Then the wall continued on from there. The ground where I now stood looked like a small patch of forgotten farmland. It was infested with weeds, some of them were almost as tall as me. Halfway to the road, a deep irrigation ditch supplied a small pond. So infested meaning that there's a lot of weeds, a lot of plants growing there and haven't been taken care of. Far to the left and behind the wall was a watchtower, which I knew from all my previous observations was always staffed with Grenzers, who constantly looked out for anyone getting too near the wall. But they need binoculars to see me well. And there didn't appear to be a border zone here, or at least nothing was marked to keep us away from the wall. And the tire tracks from the Grenzer patrols didn't look too recent. My eyes flicked back to the building in front of me, as my heart pounded with possibilities. This was the place my father had wanted me to find, and something was buried inside it. I didn't know what, but the first chance I got to return with Mama's shovel, I intended to find out.